Welcome, good evening. My name is Ara Maranian. I'm Rancho Palos Verdes City Manager, and I want to welcome you to the Town Hall. Tonight's Town Hall discussion is exclusively and solely on the building regulations that we are proposing to present to the City Council on August 5th. If you're here to speak about anything else, tonight's not the platform for that discussion. This is a very important discussion because it has to do with what the future holds in terms of how the properties within the Landslide complex can be improved, developed, whatnot, the land use decisions within properties. So tonight is solely on the discussion regarding what we're proposing to the council in terms of building regulations. Brandy Forbes, the Community Development Director, is going to take the lead with tonight's town hall and is going to go over the proposed language. The reason why we are calling this town hall at this point is before we go to the council on August 5th, and you should have received that notice in the mail. We made a point to send it to every property owner within the Greater Portuguese Bend Landslide complex. Is we wanted to present the draft language and what we're proposing to bring to the council on August 5th to give you, the public, an opportunity to see it in advance, to ask questions about it so that you can give us some input for us to consider before we take the final draft to the council on August 5th. So that is why it's very important that we talk about the building regulations. You ask us what we're proposing and how any questions that you may have as it relates to your property and what you think should apply to your property in terms of future development. So with that said, Randy will go over all the housekeeping rules. And I think many of you have been here, you know the restrooms are out these doors and to the side of the building here, and we've got snacks there. So Randy, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Just prompt my presentation. All right. As Ara mentioned, tonight is the town hall meeting to discuss the proposed regulations for the Greater Portuguese Bend Landslide. I am Brandy Forbes, the Director of Community Development. We have Ara here. We have some additional staff, our Deputy City Manager, Catherine Junn, Senior Planner Jessica Bobbitt, and Senior Admin Analysts Lisa Garrett and Megan Barnes. The format of tonight's meeting is I'm going to provide a presentation and then we will open it up to questions and answers. As Ara mentioned, this is going to be a topic just really focused on the landslide regulations. If there's something else that you're interested in talking about, I would highly recommend that you come to a city council meeting. The next discussion on the landslide is going to be on August 19th at the city council at 7 p.m. And then for when we get to open it up to the questions and answers, for those in person, we'll have a microphone that we'll bring around or we'll line people up 3 at a time and we'll be able to pass the microphone down, and then we'll take some online. We'll go back and forth that way until we get the questions answered. If you're a little shy to speak into the microphone, there you go. All right. If you're a little shy speaking into the microphone, you could also fill out a question card. The blue card's in the back, and then we can pass it over here to staff, and they'll make sure to enter those into our running list of questions. If you are joining remotely, you can enter your questions into the chat, and then the staff will compile the questions that are related to the code amendments from the cards and online, and our team will funnel those to myself and Ara for answers. So next slide. The ancient landslide covers approximately 2 square miles on the southern portion of the PV Peninsula. As I'm sure all are very aware of the location. I'm just going to give some history just for those who might not know the full history. Some of you may have moved in more recently. In August of 1957, an area of the ancient landslide began to slide. That's the Portuguese Bend landslide area. And between January of 1974 and March of 1976, an area commonly known as the Abalone Cove landslide began to slide. Both remain active, and as well, since then the area has expanded as far as movement. On September 5th of 1978, RPV City Council enacted an urgency ordinance prohibiting development of property in the ancient landslide area, as it had come to the attention of the City Council that the landslide that had been identified in the landslide moratorium map, which was they thought was previously stable, was now susceptible or experiencing landslide movement at that time. So in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare, it was necessary for the City Council to adopt that urgency ordinance. The landslide moratorium in the city's code has been in place since September of 1978. That's section or chapter 1520 of the municipal code, and it prohibits new development in the greater Portuguese Bend landslide area due to the accelerated land movement. The ordinance has been updated over the years to incorporate exceptions, but the amount of development has been limited in those exceptions. Next slide. As you may know, the heavy rainstorms in the winter of 2022-2023 triggered a historic increase in the land movement. This was subsequently exacerbated by similar weather patterns the following winter. On October 3rd of 2023, the city declared a local state of emergency and implemented an urgency ordinance prohibiting all new construction in the Portuguese Bend landslide complex. The urgency ordinance was submitted to the California Department of Housing and Community Development since it was related to housing, and HCD, as they're called, they had provided a letter of approval of the moratorium on October 6th of 2023. The urgency ordinance provided a moratorium prohibiting construction within the boundaries of the Portuguese Bend landslide complex, where no application for a permit has been accepted, considered, or issued for construction on any property within the landslide complex during the period of the urgency ordinance. There were 4 exception categories: repair and maintenance, landslide mitigation measures, immediate preservation of public health and safety, and then some construction that the city manager would deemed necessary and consistent with the moratorium to be ratified by City Council. The city followed the process for extensions to the urgency ordinance moratorium, extending it through the first full year on November 14th of 2023, and then for an additional 12-month period on September 3rd of 2024. And next slide. An interim urgency ordinance that institutes a construction moratorium can only be extended for a maximum total of a two-year lifespan, and this one is set to expire on October 2nd of this year. As we approach the sunset of the urgency ordinance, the city is required to act. Since the conditions that required the urgency ordinance are still active, the city needs to adopt permanent regulations to address the impacts of the substantial change in circumstances of the land movement and the threat to loss or damage to life, health, property, or essential public services. And next slide. The land movement conditions are still significant. In October of 2023, when the emergency was declared, the land was moving at a rate of approximately 3 inches per month. By early 2024, that movement was at a rate of close to 8 to 12 inches per month. The land movement accelerated to up to 12 to 13 inches per week last July. Although the movement has slowed, it is still moving as much as 3 to 4 inches a week in many areas, which is that equivalent to the 8 to 12 inches per month that we experienced in early 2024. That is still 4 times the rate that the land was moving when the emergency declaration was instituted in October of 2023. So the City Council does need to permanently respond to these conditions that gave the rise to the moratorium. And as well, the loss of utilities in 2024 was also significant, where SoCalGas and Southern California Edison de-energized many of the homes in the landslide area. Although power and gas have been restored to some, it is not universally restored, including that it has not been available to the city's resources, keeping the utilities and landslide mitigation efforts energized. As well, any increase in acceleration in land movement in the future that is on a level that we experienced last year would likely instigate that the providers, the SoCal Edison Southern California Edison and SoCal Gas for them to revisit de-energization. We have seen significant damage to private property throughout the landslide complex. To date, 20 homes have been red tagged, meaning that they're not habitable. And 38 homes have been yellow tagged, meaning that portions of the home may not be habitable and they have experienced damage to the structures and land. The building official only visited those homes where the owners voluntarily requested the inspection. So there may be other homes that are in similar condition that have not been inspected or red or yellow tagged, but they may have that threat to life, health, and property. Next slide. And this slide is from the geologist's report at the beginning of July, demonstrating that there is still ongoing movement. The light blue is moving at 3 to 4 inches per week. The dark blue is 2 to 3 inches per week. The indigo between the dark blue, it's kind of hard to delineate that one, but that's 1 to 2 inches per week. And then the purple to the far right, that is moving up to 1 inch per week. Seaview and some of the beach club have had a reduced amount of movement down to about 1 to 2 inches per month. Looking at this, again, I was saying that was per week, that the purple is up to 1 inch per week. But if you look at that for the magnitude of an entire month, that you're looking at 1 to 2 inches per month. And in some areas, we're seeing up to a foot per month still at the movement rates. In 2002, the city was sued in what was referred to as the Monks case. And after making its way through the full legal process, the final judgment ordered that the city include those lots that were part of that lawsuit into exceptions in the moratorium in the section 1520 that we're talking about tonight to allow them to be developed. However, many of those who did decide to develop in those Monks lots are now experiencing impacts from this accelerated land movement. So much so that 5 of those 16 lots have applied for the FEMA buyout program, having been red or yellow tagged. The point being is that there is still concern that the lots that have been previously thought to be stable may in fact still be susceptible to or experiencing current landslide movements. The reasoning for that moratorium back in 1978. Next slide. So the proposed regulations are actually an amendment to the existing landslide moratorium in the RPV Municipal Code, again, Chapter 1520. Both the track changes and the clean versions of the proposed code amendments are available on the back table, and as well, they're available on the city's website. I'm going to go over first what's prohibited in the proposed regulations or the proposed code amendments, and then I'll go through on the next slide what are the exceptions that are still going to be included. So first, what will be prohibited is new construction of residential units. It is important to note that any permit for new construction that had previously been granted but not acted upon would also be revoked. And that's already in that moratorium language. It's not something that we're removing, but I just wanted to make that clear that that's what the 1520 already has in it. As the new attached and detached garages and large accessory structures will also be prohibited. So going on to the next slide. What are the exceptions? So these are exceptions to what's prohibited. This was something that these are the options of what would be allowed. The maintenance of existing structures and facilities, the replacement, repair, or restoration of residential buildings or structures within the same square footage, height, setbacks, and footprint in the same general location on the property so as not to aggravate any hazardous geological condition. And this is both when the structure might have been damaged by a geologic hazard or other hazards such as fire or earthquake. The minor non-residential structures such as storage sheds of 320 square feet or less with no foundation would be allowed. So you could add storage onto the property. Special uses where it isn't a change in the structures and is ancillary to the principal use of residential would be allowed, such as large domestic animals and exotic animals. fence wall and hedge permits that don't involve grading or construction of retaining walls, barns and similar non-habitable structures for the sole purpose of housing animals where that facility is not fully enclosed. And this would be on lots that are currently developed, legally developed with a residential structure. The barn would not be allowed to exceed a maximum roofed area of 1,600 square feet, and it must be demonstrated to the satisfaction of the city geologist that the structure will not aggravate the existing conditions. And then non-remedial grading to a cumulative maximum of 50 cubic yards. Additionally, environmental studies, geologic investigations, remedial grading for soil stability and to reduce geotechnical hazards, lot line adjustments and similar lot mergers, bringing an existing structure that was built prior to 1978 up to code. Those are all allowed exceptions as well. They're not specifically on the construction of a structure, but they are different things that can be done. And then there is a process for a landowner to apply for their parcel to be excluded from the landslide regulation area. Now, this hasn't been changed. That's already been in that code section 1520. There are strict submittal criteria. So it's not just, oh, I don't want my lot to be there. There are criteria that would have to be met. And those have remained in the language that's currently in the existing moratorium. So next slide. Additionally, the boundaries of the landslide complex will be updated to correspond with the expanded limits of recent land movement. The existing municipal code moratorium is on the left in the red and blue outlined areas. I know this isn't easy to see. Just so you know, we will be posting the presentation online, so you'll have an opportunity to look at it, and as well, the maps are in the back. The urgency ordinance is also demonstrated on the left in the white outlined area. So that's what we're addressing right now. That's in place right now. That's the one that's sunsetting at on October 2nd. The city geologist has been mapping the boundary of the prehistoric landslide and the major affected land movement areas that have been affected since 2023 to 2025. And those are shown on the right. They are the yellow I know that yellow and green may not be as easy to see, but if you see it on the handout, the yellow is the boundary of the prehistoric landslide, and the green is the boundary of the areas that have experienced major active movement since 2023. And these have been regularly displayed in the city council staff reports that come every 60 days to city council. And we have, as we've continued the emergency declaration. The proposed map for the new code amendments we're working on now, it will be the outer boundary of the two areas on that right side map within the city limits. It is expected that 6 additional properties, 5 in Seaview and 1 in Beach Club, will be added. And there may be some that, as you can see on the left where that little tail is on the left-hand side of the map, that will be removed because it is not part of the ancient landslide or the prehistoric landslide. And next slide. So that concludes my presentation. We will open it up for questions. If we can pull up slides, propose code amendments and maps if there are questions specific that we need to pull up. So thank you. And for those, okay, Deanne's going to bring the mic around.
I just want to make sure that I'm not missing something. One of the maps that you showed regarding current land movement, it said that the colored area still has movement up until July 2025. And I was under the impression that Klondike Canyon land movement has stopped since October of 24.
It has significantly stopped. I'm not. I'll leave that one to the geologist. However, with that, this was the map at the beginning of July. So their measurements in there are some areas that are zero movement. There are some areas that are 0.08 inches per week, but there are some that are up to a half an inch per week in that purple area that's on the right. Yeah.
I was told that zero movement since October of 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That's correct. It's hard to see. It's hard to see on this map because of the color differential. But if you look at the Klondike, I'll come over to your side. The area in the, it's actually better to see it on the side. This area is, it's hard to see, but it's basically no movement in this area right here. So, and then as you get into this area, there's still some movement here, and there's just still movement here. But you are correct.
why are we applying this still?
So we gotta go. You gotta go one at a time and read.
We want to do we want to line up and then take questions right here? We could do that.
Yeah, just a question on terminology, because in your initial stage of the presentation, you talked about the moratorium being renewed every 2 years, and then you've introduced the term a permanent moratorium. So I'm just trying to understand the decision that the city council will be asked to make. Will this moratorium that you're now exposing us to or sharing with us, is this intended to go into perpetuity in the future, or is this just for another 2-year segment? I just want to get clarification on that.
Right. We're not allowed to, for this, we're only allowed to do a moratorium for up to 2 years. With that, though, the city cannot just say, okay, we're done. We're not, if there's still movement, if there's still issues and it's still being addressed, we have to address it in a permanent form. With that, that doesn't mean that as things shift and change and as we see even more reduction in the land movement, that we can't amend that ordinance. So it's not just we adopt it and it's that in perpetuity. There can be adjustments as we need to. Similar to in 1978, what was put in place was a moratorium, and then exceptions were added as those came forward and for city council to consider. As we have some of those exceptions that are going to be continuing on. Yeah.
My question is, if Seaview is zero movement, why would be included then?
We are looking at the areas that have experienced the movement in the last 2 years, and as well, we don't know what's going to happen in this next rainy season, and right now we're looking at what is in the prehistoric landslide and what has been experiencing movement.
Yes, a follow-up to that question. I'm not concerned about commenting about the restrictions on the building in the slide area, but I'd like to reiterate a general issue that is always present in these discussions, and I've done it before with the council and so forth. Just as the gentleman mentioned, if the Klondike Canyon isn't moving, why are we included? I understand that it still represents a island slide area, Klondike Canyon Landslide Abatement District. What happens is that it gets propagated as Seaview, and everyone believes that Seaview is sliding, and consequently we suffer those economic impacts as a result of that. I have a lot of sympathy and empathy, and I'm glad we're doing a lot of work to see if we can solve the problem with the Klondike Canyon Abatement District folks. I guess it's a new name, GHAD. But I think the city and the people that work this problem need to be very careful not to paint a broad brush and make Seaview as though the whole of Seaview is a slide area. I've lived here since 1972. All this happened after I got here. And I've talked to a lot of geologists. I talked to a geologist before I bought my home. And as far as we know, most of Seaview is on solid ground. So I would suggest that you be very careful and keep that in mind. And hopefully we can make sure that we're not impacted everywhere. There's 195 homes that aren't sliding.
Thank you. I'm going to go to some of the online. We have a few online questions, and then we'll come back. The first one is, will those whose homes have been severely damaged be allowed to have manufactured homes to replace? So the language is that they could replace, rebuild, restore in the same footprint. So if it can be constructed in the same footprint, that would be allowed. But that would be something we would be reviewing at the planning level. And the next question is for those, my tired eyes need to zoom in here. For those who own undeveloped land or have plans particularly approved but haven't done construction, will the city be doing eminent domain or waiting for inverse condemnation lawsuits? Follow up, has the city budgeted for eminent domain inverse condemnation lawsuits? I'm not going to speak to anything with litigation. That would be up to the city attorney to address. But that being said, is for those who have the undeveloped land, there is that concern for safety, and we're looking at that for both the property and the safety of life, and constructing on property that's unstable. These have been significantly changed circumstances than what we've experienced in the time that the moratorium was in place. And with that, we need to address that in such a way. I'll go ahead.
Thank you. So following up on some of the questions that were already asked, it was clarified that the Klondike Canyon landslide is it's stable. So my understanding from what you said earlier is you're talking about excessive. So what is your definition of excessive movement? Second, with regards to the landslide, the Klondike Canyon and the Portuguese Bend landslide, my understanding from the Q&A sessions and the discussions that we have had over the last, year and a half with the city experts and geologists is that the Klondike Canyon landslide and the Portuguese Bend landslide are different in nature. Did I misunderstood this? So why are you applying a blanket policy on all of this? So it just doesn't make sense to me. Third question, it has to do with regards to ADUs and the state law. So how do you plan on rectifying, or are you looking at rectifying how this is going to work with the state law with regards to ADUs? Thank you.
Thank you. We're definitely taking the comments and the concerns about the different areas. So we'll make sure that we're reviewing that as we review the mapping with our geologist. With that, for ADUs, it's on residential across the board. So it's not. The thing is the HCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, that does enforcement, they recognize the concern and issues with the land movement and wanting it to be safe.
Have you shared your plans with them? Have they provided you if they're okay in writing?
No, we need to adopt what's in place for them to review that.
So once this passes, this goes to Sacramento for them to review and approve or provide feedback. Is that what's going on?
Yes, we will go through that process. In fact, when we put in the moratorium that's in place now, the 2-year moratorium, we ran it by HCD and they accepted it. So I think what we all need to know is the situation we experienced the last couple of years isn't the first time that's happened in this landslide complex. In the Seaview neighborhood, your neighborhood, we started seeing movement in 2004. The council put a moratorium in 2004 on development there for about 2 to 3 years. There were heavy discussions, a lot of geologists, and ultimately it settled down. Well, look what happened 15 years later. And the evidence is right there at the intersection of Dauntless and Exultant of what could happen. And I think we are taking the position, the city has always taken the position, that new development should not be allowed in the landslide moratorium area. And it was the courts that said, no, you need to let those 16 month lots build. And now I'm shifting over to the month lots for the vacant lot questions. The courts told the city didn't do this on its own. The courts told us to do it. And now I want the courts to come and look at those 5 homes that spent millions of dollars to build on their homes, and they're split in half. But the point is, look at the 2 red tagged homes at Exultant and Dauntless. Look at the people who bought that just 2 years ago. So I mean, and the question was, is this? You had asked the question, is this permanent? Well, this ordinance is permanent, but it can be amended. It could exceptions. We saw that in 1978. The city outright prohibited development in this area, and over the years it relaxed it based on what they saw. Some things were mandated by the courts. Other things the council said at the time, this is the situation, so we're going to relax some of the requirements. So we don't know what's in store. We're taking a prudent and cautious approach in terms knowing that the moratorium in place is sunsetting and ending in a couple months. This is the position that staff is going to recommend to the council in light of everything that we've observed and the people that have been impacted. And there are a lot of people that have been impacted. We're allowing, we believe at this time, homes that were damaged. We've been working with property owners to stay in their properties. We want people to be able to stay in their properties. If they feel they can't, then they can go through the voluntary buyout program. We continue to try to secure funding. We've submitted another round for $40 million as part of the hazard mitigation grant for round 2. So we're hoping we were deemed eligible to submit the application in September. So we're hoping we'll get another 40 million. We've got 22 people that want to buy out. And I'll say when the state and the federal government approached me and said this buyout, I said, we won't get people interested in this. Maybe a dozen or folks. We had 85 applications. So that tells you there's a concern, people want to retreat. And so we're taking all that into consideration in this ordinance. We don't know. And I think it's very important for all of us to recognize if you look at what the boundary lines of the landslide was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that green line was much smaller. I don't know if you can show the green line. That green line over the last 3 years has expanded. It hasn't reached the yellow line, but it's expanded. And that's because of the water that's been in the ground. That's because of the weight that's added to the ground. There's all these contributing factors, but we don't know if that green line is going to continue to expand outward. And so we are looking at the entire landslide complex, and we're treating it at this point, at this time in 2025 as one whole area.
So does this new regulation intend to then overrule the results of the Monks and Monks 2 lawsuits with
Yes.
regard to building and including lots which are well west or outside of that green dotted line area where there is a sensor on the block on Fruit Tree Road, which shows no movement?
Yes.
Still, there would be no exception allowed, nothing you can apply for, nothing you can do on this
Yes.
regulation.
Correct.
And you think that's fair?
Well, the people who built the Monks lots on Cinnamon, Upper Cinnamon, that it wasn't moving back in 2011 when the court ruling was made.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk to them and see how they feel right now. I'm just speaking very honestly. I've been with the city for 28 years. I know these people who went through this process and spent millions of dollars to build, and their house is split in half.
I understand about the building and the weight. I understand that we started at 200 acres and now we're about 800 acres in the boundary line. The one piece that we're not discussing here is not only weight caused this landslide, is water and old infrastructure. Cal Water still has not replaced the pipes on the other side of Seaview. We're talking about ceramic pipes. We have stress on the other side of Seaview. If you drive the streets, curbs are broken and cracked. We have tarring on the streets of Seaview on the other side. My friends, this line will expand, and the landslide will expand if we do not address the old pipes that Cal Water has on the other side of Seaview. So while I appreciate this moratorium on building, we need to address the other factors, which is water, and to correct that so we don't expand these lines also. Thank you.
I'm going to do a few more online questions. We have several here. Will the proposed new building moratorium prevent successful use of builder's remedy for new construction in the defined landslide complex, especially if the movement rates drop to historical lows? Right now, we have a housing element that's certified, so builder's remedy would not be effective at this time. So as far as the moratorium goes, I don't know that that would make a difference because we're not open to the possibility of builder's remedy at this time. The next is, how has the money from KCLAD been used? Okay, been used since its inception in 1982. I think I'm going to stay away from the KCLAD and ACLAD and what's being done. I want to focus on the land regulations here. Should the residents of RPV and parts of PVE affected not be paying some sort of tax in order to help to continue to mitigate the landslide? Again, I think that that's going to be something more focused at the city council's discussion on the landslide generally. And how often will this boundary of major active land movement map be updated? I think that's a good question. I think it goes to your question or your comment about would it be expanded? I think that's something we'll be evaluating over time as we see what happens with the mitigation measures that we're doing, and if it does expand. At that point, the city council would have to consider that, and it would be something that would be adopted during, be a public hearing and be adopted via ordinance. So do we have more questions?
Thank you. We live on the west end of PV Drive South, and about 2 years ago, we discontinued any landscape irrigation. Fine, our place looks a little rustic, but I do notice that some of the neighbors are irrigating again. And as I recall, it was a request that we don't irrigate, but was that mandated or was that just a request?
It was a request. It was not something we were doing enforcement upon. So that is something that we can take into consideration. We'll be taking notes on the comments tonight. So I think that that's a really a good point, and it's something that we can address. It'll be separate from the land regulations, but I think that that's a really good point on whether we go further on the code enforcement of that.
I got two questions. In reference to the program that you laid out, is there any flexibility in potentially looking at it on a case-to-case basis in the Seaview track versus putting this all together, like it's been said earlier? I think the perception is going to be rough on Seaview because it's a small portion of Seaview that this is going to affect, but it's going to affect all of Seaview because the perception is going to be there's a problem. And with the fact that it's gone down to nearly zero, would there be a thought to maybe divide your map up and have Seaview be a portion of what you're looking at and Portuguese Bend what you're looking at and Lower Beach Club?
I think for
handle it.
Oh,
sorry. But go ahead and answer. But I got a second question too.
I think for right now, for this particular land regulations that we need to get in place, It would be a universal program for everything on that map. That being said, if there are adjustments, and we were talking about that with the map adjustment just now, it was if there are needs to revise that based on very specific things that we learn about the different areas beyond where we're at now, then that could be something that is considered as an amendment in the future.
Second question is, it does look like Seaview's pretty much settled down, and there's a lot of empty pools in Seaview. Nothing was mentioned about pools on your initial slide. What's the status, and have you guys looked at it? Has there been a determination of what you're going to do with homeowners that have empty pools? Are we going to be able to fix them? Is there going to be, what's the city's position on that?
There is the repair, replace, restore for the structures on your property. So if you have that, you can, but it wouldn't be for anything new, any addition. So if you don't have a pool, you couldn't apply for an addition, to add a pool.
Right, but if you've got an existing
if you have
pool,
one, you can do replace, repair.
they'll allow you,
restore.
if eventually people are comfortable enough to do that. Okay.
A very similar comment as this gentleman's comment. We currently have regulations, right? You're making them more restrict, right? Okay. You currently have exceptions case-to-case basis, right? Correct? Am I?
There are specific exceptions,
Right.
yes.
Why are you eliminating that?
The ones that we're eliminating for the exceptions that are there now that are no longer going to be there are for new construction and for additions onto homes. So you're allowed to replace, repair, restore your home. You're allowed to add a storage structure, barns, have those different uses. But the main ones that we're removing are new construction and additions onto your home.
I think that case-to-case exceptions should remain.
I have a question. Homeowners, they have a red tag house in Seaview neighborhood. Was there a choice besides buyouts, what they can do with their house? They can rebuild the same square footage, blueprints?
Yes.
They can.
Yes.
But they have to knock down the house completely and start from scratch.
If they need, it depends on
That's
it depends on what their circumstances. But if
They can do that.
if they needed to, they could.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
There are a number of homes that this landslide has actually gone through. So I get to the point where if the building is damaged, you can replace it. What happens when the line has gone through a building, the building is separated, now you can't get your square footage?
We've actually received a comment in writing already on a very similar question as far as could it be the same footprint but on another piece of the property. And that's something that we'll take to the city council subcommittee for them to consider that, so that it's still the same like you could move your structure to another portion of the property. That's something that we'll discuss with the subcommittee. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I'd like to just address what the lady talked about before, the rest of Seaview. I think we have to be careful that we're tying the slide area to those issues. I have been living here since 1972, as I said, and we have very, very old utilities. The water system was put in the late 50s. We've experienced on Dauntless numerous failures of the water pipes, of the main pipes. They leak for months to years, and then eventually they dig it up and repair. There are plastic water meters all over Seaview. My neighbor and mine failed within 3 months of each other, just started pouring water out onto the gutter. So the issue of utilities, I think, would be an important thing to address in this context as well for people, so that we can maybe give people that are struggling to even just keep their homes in place a little more assurance that there's somehow we can put more pressure on the utilities to get them to address what has long been known, that there are places here that move and there's a lot that doesn't. We ought to isolate them and make them compatible.
You know, it doesn't really make sense that all of the Monk's lots moved, even though they were those lots were allowed to be builded on after the court litigation. Not all of them moved. Maybe a handful. I don't know. I have not seen the data or the statistics of that. But to do this blanket prohibition is very unfair. And I think whatever boundary you draw should be drawn based on the data that you have collected over the last, whatever, 2 years. And after all the improvements and remediations that have been done, that's where the boundary should be drawn, not this blanket boundary. I do think that's very problematic. I completely understand the seriousness of the movement and what it's caused, but to the logic also to allow people to rebuild on their lots to repair, but yet they can't build on lots that haven't moved in the last years. That also doesn't make sense either. It sounds a little bit arbitrary, and that's really unfair. That's affecting people's economic value in a very material way. I get it, the public policy concern of public safety, but that has to be balanced and has to be based on the data. Not all the Monk's lots split in half. So I do request that if you guys want to do this blanket prohibition, that people are allowed an avenue to make an argument for an exclusion on a case-by-case basis, and not to close the door completely shut and to just get rid of all the exceptions that have been made in the precedent of the last 2 or 3 decades. I think that's fair. And I know you guys are not here to, I know you guys are in a tough spot, but I also hope that you guys can also consider the actual data that supports what's moving and what's not. And then for areas that are moving just slightly, perhaps you do the boundary, and then you open up an avenue in the next year or two to reconsider and to amend the boundary. At least that gives people a little bit of hope that maybe they can wait to do whatever they're thinking about doing, but they have economic rights. We are property owners. We have economic rights too. So we are also taking the risk as well when we decide to do new construction. When people want to rebuild their house that's been split, they're going to invest to another $1 million or whatever that they're going to take out a loan, but they're taking that risk. It's okay, I think, to do that. As a buyer, you take some risks. Nothing's guaranteed.
I'm going to go with another one online while you take the microphone. So the next question is, why would, if replacing an existing home, would the homeowner be allowed to float the foundation on steel? We would allow different foundations. It would be within the footprint if the foundation is going to be a lighter material, a little less impacting to the structure. We would be open to that change in the foundation. It's just it's going to have to be lighter and less impact on the geological conditions. And can you tear down your damaged home and replace with a totally different, updated, modernized design within the footprint of the original structure? No, it's going to have to be the same square footage. It's same square footage, height, setbacks. So it's going to be the same layout, the same footprint. One person asked about allowing the pool to be restored and filled, and a concern about that. And so I just want to note that we have that comment. Sorry, some of these are comments and maybe not fully questions. There's one around 1/4 of the new homes built in the after the resolution of the Monk's lawsuit are red tagged. the question is, will the city have much more stringent requirements before issuing yet more exceptions? Their comment is they don't think that worked out very well for the builders of those new homes and for the residents subjected to the building and subsequent or resulting damage to the roads and infrastructure from the building. Not more stringent, it would just, it's a prohibition of new construction. There was another comment, I think it's just a concern, possibly most critical for power reactivation in PBCA are areas moving at different rates. I think that's just a comment on what has been re-energized and what hasn't. And then a portion of Seaview were previously in a moratorium buffer area with lesser restrictions. Since this area is now stable, would the city consider a redesignation of stable area at this time? And I think we already addressed that question. So, do you have more?
Yes, thank you. We live in a Klondike Canyon area, and we pay a special tax because we're in that area. But in regard to the lady's comment moments ago about getting a survey on every lot, that'd be prohibitive for anybody, certainly for the city, to do that. Our property has a bit of movement on the west end and relatively nothing on the east end. If a surveyor were to go there and set up monuments, you'd have to a very extensive network, and of course it'd have to be tied into the grid that the city already has established. I suggest that if somebody has that special request, that they monitor their own lot with their own survey and the costs. The city has already expended a great deal. We have a lot more expenditures coming up, and we certainly don't need, in my opinion, individual lot surveys to monitor people's movement. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Since the landslide started, we have waited often not to do any reconstruction because we wanted to make sure we wanted to make sure that the land movement had stopped. And in Portuguese Bend, in the club, I've been told that a couple of meetings that we had that the land movement has basically stopped. So I would be more prone right now to do some remodeling and to sort of safeguard the property, the integrity of the property. Putting it's putting down concrete blocks or it's putting in the caissons. So am I able to also, we say you can't add any square footage. When they do the metal frames, the steel frames, I have seen that there's been a lot of square footage added below the foundation of the house or above. And so am I not allowed to add any square footage to sort of make the house more stable?
You can add a different foundation. That's not going to be the square footage of the livable space. That's what we're talking about is the square footage of the livable space. So if there's a foundation that you have that would be a lighter material, would be more protective of your structure, those are things that we will evaluate, and that would be part of that replace, repair, restore.
Well, if I add anything to the foundation, I've got area that I can also expand my wall and make more of a square footage, but you're saying no.
No addition to the livable space.
So what happens with the steel frames that they put on top of the property, where they lift the foundation up, put a steel frame, and then you've got a big hole down below where they put another couple of bedrooms? I mean, I've seen that.
I could give you the code enforcement phone number.
Sorry? I'm not a whistleblower. I'm not saying
I'm just saying that's not permitted. That's not permitted. Sorry. Okay. I got a couple more comments and questions. Let's see. Oh, I think this is okay. I feel like there's comments that people are just kind of adding on to their former comments. Um, or they're responding to somebody's what they were saying, and I'm not sure what they were saying at that time. So we got the pool question. Yeah, it was just how could you allow a pool to be restored and filled when the movement is compromised? So that it was just somebody commenting that they didn't feel that we're allowing that. You would be allowed to repair, replace, restore what structures you have in place on the property. What this person, their comment was not to allow that. That was their recommendation. This comment is new development is not the same as additions or revisions to existing homes. They agreed about the impacts, the economic impacts, and needs to be a provision for consideration on a case-by-case basis. That was their comment. And including the option to replace the foundation with steel. Somebody was recommending that. That's to your comment of replacing the foundation. And some properties have encroached onto neighboring properties. How will this issue, how will you issue a permit? That's a good question. I might turn that one over to Ara.
Was that for me?
Yeah. It was on, it says some properties have encroached onto neighboring properties. How would you issue a permit?
That's a tough question. Yeah, that's a tough question. We'd have to look at that because that is predating the issue that we're experiencing. One of the things that the city has been pursuing for almost like 10 years now was the whole idea that improvements had moved over onto other people's properties, and that we kept saying we need to address this, we need to stabilize, we have trespassing issues, we have property line issues. That's something we're going to have to look into, because you can't necessarily issue a permit to a structure that's not on its legally issued lot.
Right, but one of the things that is being allowed as an exception is a lot line adjustment. So that could be something that somebody could coordinate with their neighbors to make that lot line adjustment.
The only thing I also know, many of these improvements have moved 3 to 4 lots down from where they're supposed to be permitted, and it's isolated. I think the concern mostly is in the Zone 6 area, and if those of you who know the Perry-Elig map knows the different zones, but it'll be very interesting to see, because I think when you look at the behavior of this land movement, and some properties show structural damage because fissures went through it, but other properties may not show physical signs, but they moved. They either dropped or they slid, and so we'd have to kind of see where their improvements are in relation to their property lines, because we do know areas they've all moved. When you look at the heat map, they may not show signs of structural damage, but they most likely moved in a certain direction.
Quick question. We could extend the moratorium on August 19th, so
We're going to extend moratorium so people have the ability to go ahead and remodel their house if it's been damaged, but not significantly, but damaged.
Yes. So what these regulations that will be adopted will allow is, because right now we have the urgency ordinance that doesn't allow anything, include it only if it's an emergency repair. So what we will, if these are adopted by City Council on August 19th, they'll come into effect on the 30 days after that. So around September 19th. And at that time, people could come in and do the repair, replace, restore, to do some of the improvements that they might have been holding off on for the last 2 years because of the urgency ordinance moratorium.
Has there been any consideration by the city to require rainfall runoff from the roofs into the street? because there's a lot of runoff that goes to other properties adjacent to one's property, and there's nothing we can do about it. But if it were mandated to drain towards the street, it would keep the problem individually located.
Yep, that's a really good point. I know that there is something in the code for any improvements to roofs that would have to be tied in. So that is actually in the that code section 1520 currently, and we would make sure that would be followed.
Did anyone happen to fill out a blue sheet? Wanted to make sure to answer any of those questions if anyone had one. No?
Oh, one more online. I'm curious about the 5 homes in Seaview and the additional home in PBBC and that are to be added to the moratorium area. Would those homes also be added to the K-clad? If not, why not? I don't know about K-clad because I think that's a very distinct boundary when that was created. But that's definitely something we'll pass along to City Council. So when they're considering the conversations, I do believe that they're going to have a discussion on geologic hazard abatement areas in the coming weeks. So at that time, that would be a really good question to add.
Whoever asked, I don't know, it was, the unknown, the question, it's Karen. That is a question that needs to go before the district. The district would need to consider whether they want to expand and include other boundaries. That is not at the city's purview.
And the next question is, living in the Klondike Canyon Abatement District in Seaview, could I lift my home, use steel girders and cribbing to stabilize it, and could it be permanent? Would it require a city permit? Would that permit be temporary permit or a permanent permit? Say that 10 times fast. With that is exactly what the gentleman had been asking before is, could you do a different foundation? You could. It's going to need, your home is going to need to be in the same footprint that it is within, and it would need to be something that would follow the building codes and the building official could approve. So yes, there would be permits for many of these exceptions. There's a landslide exception permit that will be required, especially when there's something that will be construction related, and it will require a building permit. And then another question, when will the road in the upper part of the Seaview be repaired? Again, we're talking about the landslide regulations, code regulations right now. With that, City Council may want to consider that question when they have their next meeting on the landslide, or their next agenda item on the landslide on August 19th. I think, do we have any other questions? We got another one. Take care.
You mentioned something about moving 3-4 houses. My property's moved 400 feet. I am on steel. And I just spent 2.5 weeks underneath the house reinforcing it, because what I had to do underneath the house in the last 2 years was equivalent to the last 20 years. So being in the PBL, we were not granted any permits to even put a dishwasher in. And now you mentioned something about getting a permit for steel foundations.
We have allowed in the last year for the temporary foundations to be being temporary. If you're looking at, if those who are looking at something that's a permanent foundation, that was her question, was if she could have that, could it be permanent? So with yours, if you have the approval to have that that type, I know that there are some areas where, for example, using shipping containers as your foundation are allowed. That would be continue to be allowed for those particular areas. It's not changing those regulations. Her question was more on the on could she make hers permanent. Right now we allow a temporary
Well,
permit.
I don't see I hopefully it slows down like the way it used to be, but I don't see it stopping, and I don't see cement foundations as long as there is movement. So when you're saying temporary, when is the landslide going to stop?
What I'm saying is she wanted to know, can she do that as a permanent? It
Okay.
could be a permanent a permanent solution. It would have to be something that the building official could approve.
Okay,
So you would need to discuss with the building official on what options would work for your
so
structure.
you would give permits for steel foundation as if it was a permanent foundation.
Yeah, I would say you want to definitely speak with the building official. Just to make, because I don't want to just say that any steel foundation would work. That's not my expertise. It's his. And so he would be able to tell you what would or wouldn't be allowed for the building code.
Well, my house is level. There's no creeks. For me, it's fine. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Oh, wait, one more. So the city's position is that if your property has moved outside of the GSI boundaries due to the land movement versus the meets and bounds definition of the property boundaries, permits for restoration or replacement won't be approved unless your neighbors agree. I don't think we said that. It was just more of it's going to be a complex issue that that is something we'll have to look at on a case by case basis. All right. Thank you, everyone.